Hi everybody, Eric Dorward here at the Spartan Rocketry Club, continuing our build of the Quest Terrier-Orion. We are into the finishing stages. So this will hopefully be a shorter video. I still have not painted the various parts that are going to have to be painted gold, just quite yet anyway, and this is pretty straightforward. Just to note, those are plastic. It is not the world's worst idea to hit them with a plastic primer because I don't know, there's just something about metallic spray paint that doesn't seem to either bond correctly to plastic parts, or I don't know. I've also had awful experiences with clear coating them. So I'm going to do that. Right now they're just wrapped, so they need to go down to the paint shop. But the main point of this video is to demonstrate how I'm going to fill the balsa to get rid of the grain as best as I can anyway. So I have a fresh tin of, well, it's not actually a tin, a plastic container of this stuff. This is pretty good quality, at least I like it. It works pretty well, but it is brand new, which is nice. So that means that it's still like a putty. My last jar, by the time I was more or less at the end of it, it took a couple years to go through it, but it was rock hard, so I had to rehydrate it. This stuff, at any rate, is still a putty, but I'm also gonna add a bit of water to it, like maybe an eyedropper full, only a few milliliters, and then I'm gonna stir it up because it is a putty. I mean, it's a nice consistency for a lot of things, but I want to be able to paint it on with my brush. So I'm just going to stir it around here for a little bit, try to hydrate it as best as I can uniformly. Right now it is not uniform in any way, shape, or form. It is, well, it is quite liquid in some places, and the parts that aren't liquid, they are still quite putty-like. So I'll try to scrape it off my spoon here. Stir it up a bit more. There are probably better tools I could be using to do this, but this plastic spoon is my kind of go-to tool up here. It does a good job of at least getting the stuff out of the jar. Alright, that looks... it's not perfect. There's still some chunks in here, but it is pretty good. And this is actually, the consistency that I have right now is a bit runnier than I would actually like. But that's okay. As I go, this will start to dry. Just clean up my mess here a little bit. So the more time that elapses, some of this will, water will evaporate and it'll get a little bit thicker. But in any event, let's do this. I don't really need all that much, hopefully. And so I'm just going to paint it on. I'm going to come back and remove the excess, because there's a lot of excess, but I'm going to put, my brush is really quite full at the moment. I'm going to get this mixture on both sides of a fin in order. So the danger here, not that there's a whole lot of danger to this, of course, but the risk is that if you put a liquid that is mostly water on one side of a fin, but not the other, you can warp it. So I'm trying to get both sides covered pretty much as quickly as possible. First one, then the other. Yeah, I do have entirely too much. Probably should have loaded the brush up less, but I was also trying to mix it up at the same time, so that was not as easy as it could have been. Anyway, the amount I had on my brush is going to be pretty close to what I need to do the entire rocket. So I'm probably going to have a lot of excess here, and that's okay. I didn't really put all that much putty in here to start with, but like I said, this is probably quite a bit runnier than I really wanted, and I realized that I'm not quite in frame sometimes here, so sorry about that. Right now, mostly what I'm trying to do is just remove the excess that I can see, spread it out as uniformly as possible. Alright, so all four fins, both faces, now have some of this mixture on it, so I'm going to try to smooth it out. And the other thing I need to do, I'm going to brush along the edges here, mostly because I want to make sure that I didn't leave any blobs, so uneven spots that would undo the work that we did earlier to round the fins to begin with. Looks pretty good. I'm also going right next to the fin here because I know I'm getting some of this stuff onto the body tube, and that's fine. In fact, I'm going to do that purposefully a little bit, but whatever I got next to the tube at the base was not intentional, so I'm not going to get rid of it, but I want to smooth it out so that it is uniform. Alright. Looks pretty good. This is the third fin, I believe. Okay. And last but not least, just check this one. Okay, so that takes care of most of the work here. I'm going to put this aside for a minute. Hopefully there will be a little excess left. I'm going to stand it up. Might as well. I'm going to go on to the other rocket body part now. And I loaded up the brush significantly less this time, with significantly less this time, so hopefully I can go more like one fin at a time for this. This is mostly a reductive process. For the most part, it's really hard to get so little on my brush that that I would need to add excess. Now, having just said that, I do need to add more here, but that's because this is the second fin and I didn't have anywhere near enough paint to do two fins, or paint, whatever you want to call this, filler, to do two fins this time. Like one and change. There we go. So I'm going, for this coat, I'm going in the direction that the rocket, that the body tube is. I will probably end up doing a second coat depending on how well this fills, and I'll probably then go the other direction, so I'll go perpendicular. Just for, to try to cover as well as I can. I don't think any particular way is better than another in my experience, but yeah, I get the feeling that I probably will need to do a second coat for this. And partially that's because I made this a bit too thin. So, it's covering, it's fine, but I suspect it won't cover enough. So there'll be spots that need to be filled, and that's fine. It doesn't need to be perfect the first try. This is what's so time-consuming about the finishing process. This stuff actually dries quite quickly, which is nice, so that you don't have to wait forever on it. But it is a time-consuming process, and if you really, really, really want it to look nice, it's going to take multiple coats. And again, I am by no means a master finisher. I'd like to think I'm decent at the build part, certainly not an expert at that either, but I'm pretty good at it. The finishing part, though, is not in my wheelhouse. Getting the paint right is, I don't know, I will admit that I do not put in the effort and the time necessary to get a really good finish on any of these things. And I'm okay with that, because the worst thing, in my opinion, is you spend all this time, you make an absolutely gorgeous rocket, and you put it on the pad, and then the question is, what's going to happen? Well, best case scenario, you get it back totally intact. But in reality, that's not always going to happen. There's, of course, the ever-present risk that you will lose the rocket entirely. But even if you do, even if it's a perfect flight and you get it back, depending on where the rocket lands that particular day, you might end up chipping the paint. In fact, you might end up chipping the paint just getting the rocket to the flying field. If you happen to take a corner too sharply, you can end up chipping the paint right then and there, which is very, very annoying. There's not much you can do about that. I mean, other than drive carefully. Alright, so that takes care of the fins. Now, I'm going to go back to the first one, the lower part of the rocket for the time being. Hopefully that will not fall over, or I will not bump it. So I do have a little bit of fill left here. So what I'm going to end up doing is, and hopefully this is reasonably dry, I'm going to use some of this excess, and I really want to not have a lot on the brush. So I'm going to take some of it off here. And I'm going to just go over the spiral that's in the body tube. Now I'm just kind of applying it here. I am not trying to smooth it out just quite yet. I will definitely do that. And I definitely want to stay away. I'm going to have to go fix that. I'm going to stay away from the launch lug, because we certainly don't want to get, we don't want to fill that. That's the last thing that we want to do. So I'm just kind of like dabbing it on here. Alright, so that's probably good for the time being. I'm just going to brush it smooth now, or smoother. This is, you know, if you want the tube to look nice as well, you do need to fill in the spiral. But that means, you know, this isn't a major undertaking, but you are going to have to sand the tube now as a result, which is another little excess bit of work that you wouldn't have had to do otherwise. Does it really matter if there's a spiral in the tube that you can see? No, not really. I mean, it does affect the aerodynamics, but in such a trivial fashion that it's probably not worth it unless you're trying to set a world record. And even then, you know, adding this stuff costs you weight. So even if you are trying to set a world record, the advances, you know, the increased aerodynamics might not be worth it for the offset that you're going to put on in extra weight. So who knows? That was a lot right there. Alright, so yeah, that is, I mean, it's not, it needs to be sanded like really badly, but yeah, that should be fine. Let's get that out of the way. And then, yeah, so I have like the tiniest bit left, so there should be plenty to do. Some, if not, oops, some if not all of this one too. Now, right in between here, just I'm not going to go back and fill that because I got enough excess, you know, from the fins when I applied it to the fins that it kind of covered that. So I'm not going to worry about that. This is kind of hard to figure out if you're like doing it properly. I mean, you can see where the spiral is, of course, but it's really hard to tell if you're actually filling it in or not. I would just say brush over it. Whatever happens, happens. If it doesn't perfectly fill the spiral, or doesn't fill it at all, well, there are additional steps in the finishing process. So come back and do it again if you really, really want to. I have, ooh yeah, see there's a little bit of a blob there that I didn't quite incorporate thoroughly when I mixed this up. I certainly don't want that sitting on there, so that's easy enough to brush off. If you really wanted to as well, you could try to use this filler to cover up the lines that you drew to attach the fins properly, but honestly I don't really think that's probably not going to be worth your trouble. Okay, going back to smooth things out here. So I definitely, the first little bit was kind of wet, so there was a good amount of excess right there. Almost to the end. Sometimes too, by the way, there's a main spiral, and then there's kind of like its little friend. It's like it's a double helix, which is annoying, because then you've got the main one, but then there's another one. This one, if it has a second spiral, I don't see it. Alright, I got to the end. Let's just smooth things out. You could, of course, just brush over the entire tube if you wanted to, but that's going to add more weight than you need, and you're going to need more filler. Okay, that looks pretty good. Yeah, just looking at it, I can see all sorts of brush strokes in here, so all this stuff needs to be sanded. If you're going to take the time to fill in the grain here, you definitely want to sand it. Do not leave it as is, because it's going to look pretty cruddy. And I don't know what I did here, but this does not want to stand up. Okay, there we go. Alright, so the next step, which it's going to be a while, I need to let this dry. Actually, I say that it takes a while. It doesn't really. This stuff dries in like half an hour, and then you can sand it. After that, I'm going to put a layer of this stuff in here. This is basically just paint, but it seals the sanding, and then I'm going to decide if I need to put another layer of wood fill on. I'm hoping I don't. Regardless, I mean, after the wood fill and this stuff, then there's a primer coat, and that needs to be sanded down too. So even if it's not 100% perfect looking, the primer will help. So I'm hoping this will be a one coat job. Probably, I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching. I will see you in whatever comes next. See you then.